All right, our SWOT for today, students will be able to compare and contrast two texts. So after reading, comparing and contrasting, so telling what was the same, what was similar, what was alike, and then contrasting means telling what was different. So when we compare and contrast, we use a Venn diagram, and it's actually on your worksheet for today. So here we have our Venn diagram. So this side is a contrast side. So this side is telling me what's different, just as this side is, and this is telling me what's the same. So for today's case, we are comparing and contrasting two different articles or passages. We're telling what was different in these passages, and then we're also telling a similarity. So we're going to go ahead and read Don't Feed the Animals, and we're also going to read Our Animal Friends. We're going to tell what's similar and then what are the differences between the two. So don't feed the animals. Have you ever seen a chipmunk begging for food from a person? Many people might want to give the chipmunk a piece of their snack, but please don't. If we want to have healthy wild animals, then we can't give animals people food. People food can make wild animals sick. It also teaches them to need people to live. Instead of finding their own food, the animals learn to beg. When people aren't around, the animals don't know what to do. They forget how to live off the land around them. So as you can see, this passage was about if we feed these animals, they become very dependent on us to keep feeding them, and they don't adapt to the environment around them to find their own food. So it's really important that we do not feed the animals in the wild, because then they don't know how to look for their own food. Okay? It says it can also make them sick. So next passage is Our Animal Friends. We need to take care of our animals. One way to keep animals safe is not to feed them. Feeding them makes them come back for more. It keeps them from finding their own food. Another way to keep our animals safe is to be careful when driving. Many animals are killed each year by people driving too fast. All right, so I did see a similarity that I'm going to go ahead and highlight. One way to keep animals safe is not to feed them. Feeding them makes them come back for more, and it keeps them from finding their own food. This was in both passages, okay? This passage talked about why not feeding them is safer, just as this one talks about it as well. This one had two different points, whereas this one only had 1 point, okay, about feeding them, and this bottom one talked more about feeding them and why we need to be careful while driving. So let's go ahead and highlight a difference. I'm going to highlight my differences in yellow. So what was one thing that was different from this passage to this passage? Well, in both of these, it talks about if we feed them, it keeps them from finding their own food. But up here in this passage, it talked about them also, it can make them sick. Okay, it also talked about them getting sick, whereas this passage did not. Okay, it talked about why feeding them keeps them coming back for more. And this one also talked about that and why it can make them sick. So I'm also going to highlight my similarity in here as well. Instead of finding their own food, animals learn to beg. So these are my similarities in blue. You see that these are the same. So this would be a similarity. My yellow is my difference. So what's something different in this passage? That we need to be careful while driving. Okay. There are my differences. There's a difference up here, and then I have my similarities, or how they are the same. So those are what we are going to plug into this graphic organizer. How is this one different from this passage? And then what is the similarity? So you guys can go ahead and do that. And then when you're done, you'll come down to the short response. What is an important point in Animal Friends that is not in Do Not Feed the Animals? So let's say both passages talked about how to what? But then you need to say, how is this one different? In Our Animal Friends, it talks